I'll sort of launch in. I am Thea Lindquist. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship here at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And we're very pleased and excited to welcome Herman Selderhuis today to talk about the Resilience Digital Platform. Professor Herman Selderhuis is Professor of Church History at the Theological University of Apeldoorn in the Netherlands. He's President of the European Academy of Religion and President of the Reformation Research Consortium. He's a leading Reformation historian and author of several books, including John Calvin, A Pilgrim's Life, and Calvin's Theology of the Psalms. More to the point, he is one of the initiators of Resilience, a new European interdisciplinary research infrastructure for religious studies that's funded by the EU. Today, he's with us to give a talk that's very much aligned with topics that are dear to our hearts in the center, entitled Smart Tools, Fair Data, and Easy Access. Resilience is a unique research infrastructure for religious studies. So please join me in welcoming Professor Herman Selderhuis.
Thank you, Thea, for this flattering introduction, and thanks for coming to this room. And for those that participate online, although I cannot see you, I have the PowerPoint presentation in front of me, and I hope that the people online have that too. Thanks for joining and for coming here. I was planned for coming here for a different occasion, but we got into touch and we figured this out, and you offered me the possibility to present. So I'm happy to do that. So first, what is resilience? It's of course easy for me to read what's on the slide, but maybe while you were reading some of the background, there have been, in the context of the Jubilee of the European Reformation in 2017, there was a platform of some 200 institutions, universities, libraries, newspapers, travel agents working together. And that model has been used for resilience. So can we get various institutions together to create a platform to make research in religious studies more effective, more productive? Can we develop tools for translating sources in languages not so easy to access? Can we train young scholars to work with digital materials, but also to let them discover how to deal with old manuscripts and books? So that's in fact what it is, as you can see on the slide here. This is a picture of the leadership of Resilience. The main people, two are missing in this picture. It's Irene Jarocci, she's from the Fondazione Scienze Religiose in Bologna. Carla Boersma, she is leading the teams of communication. She's also in a different position, Director of Operations of REFORC, the Reformation Research Consortium. And it's Francesca Cadedu, she's the Director of Resilience. Missing on the picture is Roxanne Wins from the KU Leuven. She's an expert in digital data information. And Ahmed Alibazic, he's from the Islamic University in Sarajevo. But you can see on the picture that they have fun working on this project. And it's a very interesting project, also because it gets us to quite a few places in Europe, and you meet a lot of different people. So what we want is more effective research. You can see, bring people together. That helps, not only digital, but also physical. And can we create a bigger platform where people have easy access to the sources? The fourth bullet talks about impact. One of the reasons the European Union supports resilience in its preparatory phase, is because of the impact of religious knowledge on society. Europe also sees that one of the reasons for conflicts on a smaller scale, larger scale, is religious illiteracy. If you think that every Muslim is a terrorist or every Jew has these positions, that creates disorder and it creates all kinds of well, we have a flood of anti-Semitism at the moment in Europe, but on a smaller scale, also misunderstanding. So how do we get good information to people working in hospitals, in education, in politics? And that's why it's important to have good research, and research needs good access to the sources. So that's in fact the chain. European money always relates to, money for research always relates to the broader society, the relevance of a project. These are the institutions working in resilience. Albanian University Bar Ilan is in Israel, Leuven, Belgium, INFI in Germany, ESFRI Bologna, École Pratique in Paris, Sineca in Italy, Apeldoorn, that's my institution in the Netherlands, Sarajevo, Sofia, Bulgaria, Warsaw, Volos in Greece, and the University of Münster. And each of these institutions has a specific task in resilience. Some of the work packages, 2 or 3 work together, other work packages all work together. So it's very, I find it a very complicated system, but that's how European projects work. And it's very interesting to see also the various needs. Welcome. This is how it looks. We first had the design phase, 2014 to 2020. The model may be given complicated impression, but these are the steps you have to take towards becoming an ERIC, a European Research Infrastructure Consortium. So now we are in the preparatory phase. That means we built, so to speak, we built the restaurant, and we asked the potential customers, what do you need? So we went to Bulgaria, Sofia, and had meetings there with scholars. So what do you need? Do you need money? And they said, no, we don't need money, would be nice, but we need access to the sources in monasteries. And there's some bishop sitting on top of these collections, and he's not giving access because researchers are dangerous for theological sources. So keep them away. And we need Europe to help us get access to these sources because they're important to understand the history of the Balkan, for example. So we built the restaurant in the preparatory phase, collect information on needs, prepare training programs, see what digital facilities we want to use, what is out there. And then in 26, the governments, the European governments decide, do we want to be owner of this restaurant? And if you want to be an owner, you have to pay. And then the governments, they pay for the work, so the institutions get extra money to work on resilience, and then we can continue for the implementation phase, and then you see the rest. We didn't go further than 2055, which is quite a ways off, but other numbers could be mentioned. So that is the process we're in. I already said that the ERIC legal structure means it is in fact as a company owned by the ministries of the various countries. And their question is, what are the institutions going to bring in kind resources? How much money do you need to keep this ERIC running? And we have the agreements with server providers, like with the major publishers. What can you do for us? But also with libraries and institutions and the TNA host. TNA stands for Transnational Access. That is a program that's running now already. Scholars can go from one country to another country and say, well, there's a professor, for example, I'm in Volos in Greece, and there's a professor in Münster, Germany, who is an expert in my field. I'd like to go there and spend time with him for a week or 4 weeks or 3 months. And then Resilience arranges that communication, that a scholar can go there and spend time in the library. So that's the TNA program, one of the services that functions now already. What should be ready in 2026? Well, you can see the various points that we are working on at the moment. And important is the service catalog. Service catalog is the menu of the restaurant. What do you have to offer? And here comes in a challenge for Resilience, because publishers are interested in resilience, but they need to make money also. And they have hard times. I don't have to tell you about that. We had the big news 2 weeks ago that the Gruyter, Berlin, New York, has bought Brill. Who would expect that Brill needs a buyer. So the Gruyter, the major academic publisher on the continent, has bought Brill. And they have an interest in resilience, but they say, well, who's going to pay for it? Someone has to pay for all this, but I don't have to tell you that. So who's going to pay for the services? Now, as long as governments say this is important for our research in our country, and it's important that these products go to the wider audience, then we will help you pay for this. Beyond that, the long-term goals, larger scientific aggregations, assembling results, offering access that is very essential for many institutions, especially in Eastern Europe. And I speak about Europe, but the project, of course, goes wider than that. But for the moment, we stick to Europe because European Union finances the preparatory phase. Support scholars. To name an example, the great variety of Europe creates challenges. In Germany, for example, you do not have to explain to a government the importance of research. They spend tons of billions of money on research. It's the research country in Europe. France also. But my colleague from Sarajevo says, my government thinks that researchers, they just fool around all day and they have no contribution to society, whatever. So they don't not going to spend money on research. So how do we communicate to that leadership in that country that this is important for society? Yeah, that's the last bullet. Now, the central thing is knowledge. Knowledge ad intra is the knowledge within the institutions. Increase that knowledge. Knowledge ad extra is how can we communicate what research has found to the wider audience, to politicians, also to those that say spending money on research is a waste of money, but also to schools. How can we get with the research findings into school books? We had a session in Paris on the content of religion in school books. And it was, in some cases, shocking. Shocking to hear from some countries how, for example, the history of Israel is described in a very negative way. Or how in another country, what is being told about Islam feeds negative images about Islam. So we want to get good, reliable knowledge out. That relates to the third bullet, knowledge as a means for the for society, and knowledge as a goal. That is the inherent motivation of a researcher, that I just want to create more knowledge. That's how we do it. And the picture is from the Lapire Library in Palermo. That is a library on Islamic studies in Palermo, an initiative from the Fondazione in Bologna. And the books you see there, they are a gift of the King of Jordan, who says, I give you, he gave a large sum of money for buying these books, because he says good knowledge of Islam is important for Europe and for the world. Excuse me. Now, the focus is on digital sources, but we do not want to forget the physical sources. That's why I put on the word hybrid. Well, we know, I see that with my grandchildren. So the youngest one, when I show him a book and a picture, he goes like this in the picture, try to make it bigger. We want people to know that there are still books. And that books and manuscripts and physical material is important for research. If you have only one copy of an old book online, you might miss that copy with marginalia that would be helpful for your research. The hidden aspects, I mentioned the libraries in Bulgaria as an example, and there's much more out there that is still hidden as resources, and Resilience wants to bring that to the open and make it accessible. Then the handwork of working with digital sources, but also with physical sources. We had a workshop in Mainz in Germany on how to deal with an old manuscript. How do you conserve it? How do you make use of it? How do you digitize it? And that relates to one of the big items in Europe at the moment, the whole concept of heritage. So how can we keep what we have instead of destroying it? As I heard from a librarian who had a private research library, and he ran into some financial trouble, and he decided to sell half of his collection with the argument, everything is online anyways. So then the books are just gone and no one knows where they went. So the heritage aspect is important for Resilience also. I mentioned already the TNA Fellowship program that is a real success for Resilience, because it helps scholars, especially younger scholars, to not only go to a place, but to have in-person meetings with experts in the field. Now this is, I added the slide because it's part of it, and you probably know everything about this, and I hardly know anything about this. So don't ask me tough questions about these kinds of things. Data management and digital service, I'm completely new. I'm also a little old-fashioned. I'm a book person still, but I do see the massive importance and the great possibilities it all has. But this is, in fact, one of the key aspects of Resilience, user services. Research data management and the fair data principle, we're now having a discussion about what to do with interviews for a dissertation on a topic with a complicated subject matter. Should we just delete them? Should we keep them? Where do we keep them? Who gets the access? And as you know, a lot of these data just get lost somewhere. So how do we deal with that? The key question, what do users need? And for Europe, like I said before, it is a challenge. Last Friday, there was a workshop in Münster with scholars, German scholars. So what would you need in this context? And their needs are completely different than those from Bulgaria or from France. And, so we try to bring that together. Training services, multilingual tools, that I think is very important for research. In Bulgaria, they showed us wonderful books, and I could recognize the pictures, but the language is completely inaccessible, even for some Bulgarians, because it's a Bulgarian dialect, a religious book in the Bulgarian dialect. So can we make tools to translate that in a reliable way, in a fast way? And then the relevance, this is Ahmed Alibazic and the famous bridge in Mostar as an example of uniting scholars, bringing people together from various fields. Yesterday, I had a talk with a professor in Tehran, in Iran, who was very interested in resilience. He says because the digital access gives us massive possibilities. We have limited possibilities of traveling, visiting libraries, so this would be very helpful for us. And also like I said, the connection between Islamic sources, Jewish sources, Christian sources, non-religious sources in this field is very important. And yeah, we need people also from religious universities or Islamic universities to create a sense of confidence and trust to get to those sources that are so far locked away for religious reasons. Out of the REFORC projects arose the European Academy of Religion. The Academy is somewhat similar to the American Academy of Religion, with this difference that we have a link to politics, to other sciences. Conference meets in Palermo, so if you need an excuse to go to Sicily, here we have one. We had a conference in St. Andrews in June of this year. It's a gathering of some 1,000, 1,200 scholars, mostly from Europe, but a growing number come from Africa and North America and Asia also. And that is kind of a sister project of resilience. So resilience is open for partnerships and memberships for cooperation. In this phase, we want to enlarge the consortium. Some new members are the ecclesiastical libraries in Cyprus. They signed up last week. And the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. We got requests from institutions in Turkey to take part in this. And the more institutions we have in the consortium, the better it is for the future of resilience. This is the team from Münster, picture from last week. They are always enthusiastic, not only when they talk about resilience, but also when they talk about soccer or wine or beer. It's just I think, a very important project. It's a fun project. And I'm eager to hear responses from your side here in the room or online. Also because the perspective from an American might be very different than from someone from Europe. So that's my presentation so far, and I'm happy to receive questions.